to put the basketball in and get the lead back to the Jayhawks, 22-21 here.
Every possession so valuable tonight. Brady! Oh! Rourke, another three!
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jack Ridenour and Sean Meyers.
We welcome you into another episode of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast here on the Westmoreland Sports Network's YouTube channel. I'm Sean Meyers, as always, joined by my good pal, Jack Ridenour. And Jack, a big show to get to once again. We love the quick pace of basketball. Our show tries to emulate that. We'll have, of course, our plays of the week. Our team of the week is the Penn-Trafford girls. They are much deserving, still perfect on the season. A look ahead at a very busy section slate this upcoming week as well, both high school and college ranks. But I want to start with our starting five takeaways, the biggest stories from this past week. And Jack, pretty obvious where we were going to begin. We could have told you that a week ago. Jeanette, GCC on the boys' side of things. And it turned out that on the road, the Centurions got a massive victory, a little bit of vengeance, if you will, from falling in the state playoffs last year against Jeanette. They hand the Jayhawks their first loss of the 2024-2025 season. And it's kind of interesting that the player who came to the forefront, Samir Crosby, who was not even playing basketball a year ago, guides GCC to a 53-47 victory.
Not to mention, does it against players that he grew up with over at Jeanette as well. And it was interesting reading an article after the game. He was quoted mentioning that, he had kind of a bad taste in his mouth from the football season when GCC lost to Jeanette. So he had waited for this, and he really put on a performance. He had 15 of his 19 points in the second half alone. It was interesting to watch. I was watching some of the game, Sean, and noticed that it was, I don't want to say nearly identical, but almost to last year's regular season meeting where Jeanette came out early, started out very strong, similar to this year, came out on an 8-point lead in the second quarter, but then GCC goes to a 2-3 zone, and that's when things just fall apart. And Jeanette had the same issue last year. They could not crack the code for GCC's 2-3 zone. This year, the same thing. And so for Jeanette, I think this really seems to be maybe something they need to sit down and address and say, hey, if our biggest issues, we can't play against a zone, teams are going to do that left and right. They're going to just play a 2-3 zone, and we're going to have a nightmare the whole time. So they really need to sit down and figure out how to figure out a zone, because if not, teams are going to continue to do that against them. And give credit to GCC noticing, hey, we go to the zone, all of a sudden that 8-point lead is relinquished, and GCC goes away with a win.
Yeah, but I will say this. For Jeanette, you probably assumed you weren't going to go undefeated all season long. I mean, that almost never happens, regardless of what classification you play in. You'd much rather lose this one than in the postseason. So they'll get another crack at the Centurions. Obviously, that will be at GCC. But I still think you walk away, if you were a fan at this game or if you tuned in on our coverage on WSN, thinking that these are, maybe the two favorites still in Class 2A. I don't know that necessarily this changes things drastically, although if the Centurions do win the next time around as well, there's almost no doubt that they would get a better seed than Jeanette, which ultimately might give them a little bit easier of a path, but that's getting too far ahead of things. Again, both these teams, I think, the goals have not changed in terms of the long run.
Without question, and especially with the fact that these are two really talented teams that reloaded from last year. We mentioned about all the players that GCC brought back. You got Brady O'Rourke, you have Liam Gallagher, Samir Crosby.
Congrats to O'Rourke, by the way, just made his college commitment to stay in Westmoreland County.
Yeah, St. Vincent. So they got a really nice pickup, a great basketball player, good 3-and-D guy. But, and I think for Jeanette, like you said, they know they're not going to win every single game. And I think it's good that they got this loss out of the way. This isn't like a team where they're 17-18-0 and they suffer their first loss at the end of the regular season. Going into the playoffs, that's a way worse of a situation, in my opinion, because that loss is so in the forefront of your mind. So for Jeanette, I think this is a good thing. They get it out of the way. They have some tape that they can go back and look at. And hey, let's not forget, this was a 4-point game with less than a minute to go. Jeanette was still around in this game. So this was by no means a blowout. I mean, Jeanette had the biggest lead of the game, an 8-point separation. So that these two, the next time they meet up, it's going to come down to the wire again.
Yes, certainly. Well, a game that did not come down to the wire involving Greensburg Central Catholic happened on the girls' side. And to be honest, I was kind of shocked to see how lopsided it was in this marquee matchup. Centurions on the road against Shadyside Academy. Both of these teams are defending champions. Now, Shadyside won it in 3A a year ago. GCC won the Class 2A title. They had to move up because of the PIAA competitive balance. And this one did not prove to be very competitive as the Bulldogs really blew it open 62-33. Erica Gribble was limited to just 9 points. I think this may be a little bit of a wake-up call for the Centurions. This is maybe the best team that they're going to see all season long, but how they bounce back from a lopsided loss, knowing that they're going to see Shadyside once again, will be a test. And I thought we were going to see a test pretty shortly thereafter. They were slated, GCC was to host Oakland Catholic, which would have been a great game. That game was postponed, so we'll see if they make that up. But Coach Scattell, I'm sure we'll have to rally the troops after a pretty lopsided loss that was way more one-sided than I anticipated going in.
Without question. I mean, especially when you look at the numbers that these two teams are putting up, and especially defensively. I mean, Shadyside holds teams to about the amount that GCC scored, 33.7 on the season, and GCC had 33. GCC actually is holding teams to fewer points per game, under 30 a game, and they allowed 62 to Shadyside Academy. So I think that this is a game where you want to say you want to burn the tape, right? I think that phrase probably will get thrown around. Let's forget about this game. Let's take away, let's take some of the positives. Let's work on the negatives, obviously, but you don't want to dwell on a game like this, right? Especially when you lose by 30. 27 of your 33 points come from two players. Jayla Peterson had 18 and Gribble, like you mentioned, had 9. And Gribble on the year is averaging 22. So Shadyside just had a masterclass of a defensive performance, and that's going to happen. There's going to be nights where you just can't make anything. And I think I've also read that Gribble had just 1 3-pointer, and she's much higher of a 3-point shooter than that. So these are outlier games. These are games that, and I'm sure for GCC, they'll look back at and say, hey, we learned a lot from this almost 30-point loss. And again, we have to also remember, this is a Shadyside team that's been in 3A. They were the 3A reigning champions. GCC is playing up. I obviously understand they have to continue to get used to that since they're in the new classification. But this is a Shadyside team, a Bulldogs team that they're used to this brand of basketball. And GCC, maybe, like you said, Sean, it's their truest wake-up call in their new classification.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, the fact that the Centurions without Abby DeLugo sat seemingly loomed pretty large. Jonna Burke, the head coach for Shadyside, has had so much success. She is a living legend. So it seems like round one of that coaching matchup probably went in her favor. We'll see what the Centurions are able to do. And again, much like we said about Jeanette, one loss is not going to, likely derail their season. They still have an incredibly talented team. Well, the Kiski area boys have made some noise recently, Jack. KA with Corey Smith guiding the way, our good pal, notched a pair of key wins this past week, most recently against the Plum Mustangs. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't know how good this team would be. They lost a lot from a year ago. They're in a little bit different of a section, but so far, so good. Now, I know they're going to have some stiff tests upcoming, but I would say that so far they have surpassed expectations.
It's been their brand of basketball that I think has been the biggest difference. They want to play fast. They've been known, especially this season, to be kind of a trap-oriented team. And I think that's how they've been able to just absolutely suffocate some of these teams they're playing. They beat Shaler by 20. And again, I know that's a Shaler team that lost a lot of really good players from last year and a historic season for them. But then you beat Plum 57-30. You destroy Armstrong 64-39. They're just mowing over teams left and right. And I think, you go back to some of their losses, and they lost to a very good GCC team earlier this season as well. So you have some of these, mixings of a team that's been able to destroy their opponents. They've had some tough losses against good teams, but they've also been close in a lot of these losses. I mean, they're keeping it within single digits in games that they're losing in. So I think Kiski area, they've got the making to have a nice little playoff run. I think they could make some noise deeper into the season. And I think the biggest thing, again, will be their defense. How can they continue to play this style of basketball, up-tempo, in your face, jump trapping, coming at half court and trapping? That's a very helter-skelter type of basketball. And that, in a lot of ways, can lead you to a lot of wins.
Yeah, and some familiar names there for the Cavaliers as well. Amari Gonzalez. It feels like there's been a Gonzalez leading the way for almost a decade now. Colin Keller as well. Jacob Musselman had a good performance. So Corey Smith, I have always liked what I've seen from him. He's a really good coach, and he's done good stuff with this team, obviously, to get them in a position where they have a chance, maybe, if they can knock off Penn Hills, to be a first place team. Well, a team that's dropped well below first place recently is the Hempfield area girls. And Jack, you would have to imagine some of those players are thinking, not this again, because this is almost history repeating itself from exactly what happened a year ago. Now, you hope that these players are still optimistic that they can write a different ending, at the second part of January and then certainly into February. But we saw a great start last year that kind of short-circuited once the calendar turned, and this team has lost 2 straight, but their skid goes back even to before Christmas. They have, really struggled against some better competitions that they have played. No shame in losing to Upper St. Clair, but you look at the conference already, and you have to wonder, do they have a path to get into the postseason?
And it goes back, like you mentioned, before the turn of the year, and it goes back to the loss to Mount Lebanon, a heartbreaker. You lose by 2 to a really good section team. And that right there, I think, can be something that sets a team, their course a little offline. Good thing, though, that they beat Connellsville a couple games ago. I feel like that would have been a huge crossroads for them, where if they had lost that game, would have been 6 straight losses for them. So that's looking at 6-6 after a 6-0 start. Vastly different feel now that they're 7-5. So you have a little bit of cushion. Okay, we've got, obviously 2 games above 500 overall. That section record needs to go up for sure. And it's not going to get any easier. Like you mentioned, they have a tough road ahead of them. They've got Norwin coming up next. Penn-Trafford, obviously, not in the same classification, but still a very good Penn-Trafford team that we'll talk about in a little bit. And then before you know it, they've got Mount Lebanon again next week. So they have
that feels like an absolutely crucial game, right? I look at the games against Mount Lebanon and Cannon McMillan as the ones that will likely determine if they're in or out.
Without question. And they have to, make sure that they beat Connellsville again. Those are, in seasons like this for a team that, is kind of teetering on that, this could get really ugly. You have to beat the teams that you on paper are supposed to beat. You can't have a loss where, we play down to our competition. And it's no knock on Connellsville. Again, I haven't seen Connellsville play this year, but just looking at the score, 69-37 final. You beat them by over 30. Obviously, that's a game that I'm sure Hempfield feels pretty confident going into. So they need to win those games. And if they can steal a game against Upper St. Clair later in the season, I know the Panthers are really good, and we've seen them play a little bit. They look like a true title contender. But if they can steal a game against Upper St. Clair, split with Norwin, beat Mount Lebanon, beat Connellsville again, and try and hopefully beat a Cannon McMillan team. They do have a little bit of that controlling of their own destiny right now. It's still in their hands. But if they lose to Mount Lebanon, if they fall to Norwin, and then they're going up against Cannon McMillan on, a little bit of a downspurt, it could be a slippery slope that they're right now walking on.
Well, a team that is completely trending in the opposite direction recently is the Franklin Regional Girls. They are now 5-0 in section play. I had a chance to see them right after the turn of the new year. They got another section win at Armstrong last week. Yes, Armstrong has, really fallen off after making a championship run last year. They lost so many great players, but still to win 63-36 on the road is impressive. This is a team that I think we are seeing newfound confidence. They've got a very senior-laden group augmented by some really good freshmen. And I think the most important thing is their coach, Bernie Puchka, is in his 4th year. You understand, Jack, the significance of if you have a coach that is there for all 4 of the classes from when they started at the varsity level, meaning the seniors all began their high school career playing under him, that makes a world of difference. And I think we're starting to see that come to fruition this year with a great regular season.
Without question. You look at the players that have really matured through the system and the program. Madison DeRiggi, a player that last year earned a ton of playing time with Angelina Brush being injured for most of the season, or at least in and out of the lineup. And so now DeRiggi has a whole extra year, maybe even more with how much playing time she got last year of experience.
She's the go-to player now offensively, no doubt about that.
100%. And when you also factor in, you've got Addison Musto, a player that can stretch the defense some. She's also exactly what you want in a shooter, somebody that is going to shoot it no matter what type of evening she's having. And then Torrin Fulton, I think, I want to say she's kind of the glue to all of this. She has been arguably the most experienced player that has played the most amount of basketball out of all of these players on varsity. And I think that allows for, DeRiggi, Musto, other players that, maybe haven't had as much as Torrin Fulton. They can lean on her in these moments of, hey, she's been around when the team was not nearly as good as it was before, right? These are players that are also carrying a lot of momentum from last year's season that they came so close to going to the playoffs. And I think that's got to be a big motivator for them right now. Hey, we got so close to the playoffs. Let's make sure that we actually get over that threshold and get into the postseason.
And they have another big test upcoming that we'll talk about a little bit later on as we look ahead. That's our starting 5 takeaways. Now it's time for plays of the week. We've got 3 at the high school level and 1 more collegiately. We'll begin with a pair from Norwin High School with the Norwin girls and the Knights. They had a resurgent week, and Kendall Berger was a big part of it. Against Cannon McMillan on Friday, she showed off her defensive chops on consecutive possessions, adding to Norwin's third quarter lead with myself and Roger Downs on the call.
Brzezinski showed enough, and now Berger comes sneaking in for a takeaway and will soar in for a layup.
Tell you what, Madison Clare turned her back the entire night roster, and Berger made her pay.
Now Berger was a help defender there, not the primary defender, and snuck up, and now that time she jumps in the passing lane. Berger again! Back-to-back steals and layups for Kendall Berger.
We think so much about offense with Kendall Berger, but her defense was really paramount in that victory against the Big Macs. Really impressive stuff to get 2 steals on 2 consecutive possessions. We continue plays of the week with the Norwin boys, and Knights used a big second half to defeat the Big Macs on Friday. But perhaps the biggest play came to end the first quarter as Alex Tyner beat the buzzer on a long 3 to pull his team within a single point, with once again myself and Roger detailing the action.
Out of control on the closeout, but the shot is off the mark by Jansma. Now Norwin, maybe a heave upcoming. Tyner, it will count, and it's in! Tyner banks in the 3 to beat the first quarter buzzer, and it pulls the Knights within 1.
24-hour banking, the ATM is open.
I thought he was going to have to put it up beyond midcourt. He was able to get it not that far behind the 3-point line, so congrats to Tyner. He let that kind of stay in his hand as long as humanly possible. Looks like he got it off with maybe a tenth of a second before the horn would have sounded there. But it counted, and it was a big one for the Knights in their eventual win. We continue plays of the week with the GCC boys, and after not playing basketball last year, Samir Crosby made an impact for the Centurions this season in a big way. He went off in a marquee matchup at Jeanette on Friday, including this incredible finish around 3 defenders to extend GCC's lead in the fourth, with Brent Wiggum and Anthony D'Annunzio providing the commentary.
It's Greensburg Central Catholic.
They do not make many mistakes against themselves. Crosby inside finds a way. 2 more. Samir Crosby, 48-41.
What a terrific finish through traffic. Crosby is just an unbelievable athlete. We've seen him do it on the football field, obviously. Probably not a true basketball player in the sense maybe some of his teammates have played it as their primary sport his whole life, but he's so good he finds a way to make it work, and he has that winning attitude, obviously, that carries over between sports as well. We'll wrap up plays of the week with Seton Hill University women, and the Griffins ladies continued to roll this past week as they won at home against Clarion on Wednesday. The team showed its penchant for sharing the ball early on, with myself and Roger providing the captain.
Out there for Clarion. Nice defensive rebound by Hallie Cowan after the box. Throws it ahead to Fry. Jump past Kalic. Look at the ball movement. Leads to it. Bailey 3, and she knocks it down.
Great ball movement, Sean.
Great stuff again from the Griffins. They are now 9-0 in the PSAC. This team is certainly rewriting the record books in Griffins history. That'll do it for Plays of the Week. But, Jack, we will quickly shift to our Team of the Week. And I think it was a pretty easy selection this week. This is not just for what they did this past week. This is kind of a body of work up to this point. When you make it into mid-January undefeated, you deserve credit as Team of the Week. The Penn-Trafford girls are now 12-0. They're 5-0 in Class 5A Section 1. They're outscoring their opponents by about 23 points per game. They continue to handle business. They won a couple of blowouts last week against Kiski area and McKeesport. So really, we saw right from the get-go this season, they knocked off Norwin. That was a statement win, and for the most part, they have not looked back.
And you have to go back 4 games ago to the team that was the last to at least be within 15 points in a losing end, obviously, to Penn-Trafford, and that was Latrobe. Since then, it's been about 25 to 30 points that they're blowing teams out. Mind you, these are also section opponents. These are teams that they're going up against for section title, playoffs, what have you. And you mentioned the win against Norwin. I really think that was maybe what has set this run off. And you look at ever since then, and their confidence has grown every single game. Not to mention, and we've mentioned it before, though, the depth of this team is going to be a major factor. Even going all the way down to the freshman class, Rhea Johnson has been having a great season, her first year in varsity basketball. Would not know that has been playing varsity basketball for a couple months, plays well beyond her years. But I think the biggest thing is this team has dealt with injuries in the past. This seems to be the most healthy that they've been in at least the last 2-3 years.
Fingers crossed, Jack.
Fingers crossed. And that's allowed for a lot of these players to mature in previous seasons. So the depth is being built out because of those opportunities that were kind of afforded for because of the injuries that were happening in the previous season. So it's all kind of come full circle. And I think for Penn-Trafford, if again, knock on wood, they keep everyone healthy. They've got great length inside and out. They've got great senior experience with Lauren Martin and Cameron Piper. I mean, and then Tori DeStefano running the show. They really have the makings of a team that can go far in the playoffs.
Yeah, and they have the Weissar twins who are big contributors. We'll see them often start. They have the Bellas, Klobuchar, as well as Fontana. You mentioned Rhea Johnson. And the common thread in all this is a championship-winning coach in John Janikis. Now, it's been about a decade, but he knows how to succeed in the postseason. I did that Westmoreland alum Q&A recently with Mara Suman, and I was looking back, and I was shocked that they didn't really make any postseason runs throughout her time. They've been in the playoffs every single year pretty much. The question is, can they get to the playoffs and win some games? They had a heartbreaker, a 1-point loss last year against Lincoln Park where they almost pulled off a big upset. It does feel like, one, they're going to position themselves to get a good seed, which should create an easier path to postseason success if they keep this up. But two, that they have players now that I think, so far from what we've seen from this team, I don't see any glaring weaknesses. I don't know how they're going to be exploited in the playoffs. I think that they are probably a team that's going to win 1, 2, maybe even 3 games or more once we get to late February.
And they've got those players that have, they've tasted that defeat before, right? I mean, Lauren Martin knows, Cameron Piper knows, Tori DeStefano missing out a large portion of her season last year. This is also kind of a redemption tour a little bit for this Warriors team. They want to get back to a point that, they've been to, and they want to exceed that point. And to your, to what you said about Coach Janikis, he obviously knows what it takes to get to a title and win a title. And I think now it's coming together. And again, if everybody, does their part, players stay healthy, I think their biggest challenge is going to be Indiana. I think Indiana is going to be the one team. I know they play them tonight and they play them later in February. Those are going to be the 2 biggest tests for them the rest of the season, at least as of right now, from what the teams have, kind of been able to muster up against this Warriors team in previous games.
Well, that is our Team of the Week, the Penn-Trafford girls, and certainly they are more than deserving. They are still unblemished at 12-0. Congrats to them. Well, we talked about Penn-Trafford and their upcoming schedule. Let's look ahead quickly at the boys and girls schedule for this upcoming week around Westmoreland County. On the boys' side, Tuesday, Jack, you will have the call of Norwin at Hempfield. That, of course, is always fun and meaningful this year because both those teams have been much improved. They are in postseason contention. Also, Penn Hills at Kiski area. That's a big one for the Cavaliers. Derry area at Elizabeth Forward, and Jeanette trying to bounce back at Clairton. Friday, Penn-Trafford, Franklin Regional on WSN. We'll also have Connellsville at Norwin on our airwaves. Mount Lebanon at Hempfield on Friday. Gateway at Greater Latrobe. York at Greensburg-Salem. Elizabeth Forward at Southmoreland. Also significant games. And then Saturday, non-conference, it is Hempfield at Gateway. On the girls' side, we mentioned a big one tonight. Well, there's a few big ones tonight. Shaler at Franklin Regional. I will have the broadcast of that on WSN. Norwin at Hempfield. Penn-Trafford at Indiana. Borough at Oakland Catholic. Bell Vernon at Southmoreland. Deer Lakes at Greensburg Central Catholic. Those are all marquee matchups in the WPIAL girls' slate of things. Wednesday, Hempfield at Penn-Trafford, and a non-section, Ligonier Valley at Jeanette. Thursday, Penn-Trafford at Greensburg-Salem. Jack, you and I had the first meeting between those teams at PT this season. York at Mount Pleasant. And on the college slate of things, Wednesday, Chatham at St. Vincent, a doubleheader between the women and men. And then Saturday, Seton Hill at IUP. That, of course, a doubleheader as well. And St. Vincent at Grove City. What jumps out for the schedule for you, Jack?
I'm curious about this Norwin-Hempfield game on Tuesday. I think that's a big one for both boys teams. I think that those are, especially for Norwin, they want to keep things rolling as of late. But also, I think Mount Lebanon and Hempfield on Friday for the boys. I think these are two big games for Hempfield. I mean, these feel like early, at least early January section games that they need to win. But then for college, Seton Hill men, they need a win. They need to get a win, desperately looking for one.
Yeah, not easy to do that in Indiana against the Crimson Hawks. Big ones as well for the Bearcats. They're playing some good basketball, both on the men's and women's side, going against Chatham. Jack, you're familiar with Chatham basketball a little bit. And then Grove City usually has a very good program for both the men and women as well. That's going to do it for this edition of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast. Of course, you can go back, watch our old episodes, check out all of our great content on our social media channels, not only YouTube. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And then most importantly, check out our website each and every day. We've got such great content. Not only do we have the live broadcasts, we have the Westmoreland alum Q&As, we have game recaps, we have Recruiting Thursday, we have the Westmoreland County Sports Notebook. So always fun stuff to check out on our website, in addition to all the live and archive broadcasts. That will do it for this edition of Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast. For my colleague Jack Ridenour, Sean Meyers signing off. We'll catch you again next week right here on the Westmoreland Sports Network's YouTube channel.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.